We measure age in linear time. We measure history in straight lines, past, present, future. We believe that the oldest human is the one born farthest back in the timeline, an ancestor buried in the dust of Africa or the caves of Europe. We assume that the timeline flows in one direction, like a river rushing toward the sea. But what if the river circles back? What if the oldest human in history isn't a primitive ancestor holding a stone tool? What if the oldest human hasn't been born yet? In the early months of 2025, the timeline of our species didn't just break, it looped. A discovery was made that defies geology, biology, and physics. It suggests that we are not moving forward into the unknown. We are moving toward a point of origin that has already happened. This is the story of the time paradox discovery, and the man who is waiting for us, trapped in the stone, 300,000 years in the past. The event began in the mundane silence of a geological survey. In the desolate, wind-scarred rock formations of western Colorado, a team of geochronologists was conducting ultra-deep core drilling. They were looking for rare earth mineral deposits in a sandstone layer dated to the Middle Pleistocene epoch, roughly 300,000 years ago. It was routine science, boring science, until the drill bit returned with a sample that should not have existed. Encased within a perfectly spherical geode, protected from the crushing pressure and the searing heat of the Earth by a shell of unknown crystalline structure, was biological matter. Not a fossil, not a mineralized imprint, but soft, viable tissue. The team initially thought it was a mistake, perhaps a subterranean fungus or a pocket of ancient bacteria. But when they cracked the seal, the sample didn't degrade, it didn't oxidize. It remained fresh, as if it had been preserved in a stasis field just moments ago. Researchers found cells with intact chromatin structure. They found fragments of telomeres that showed signs of artificial lengthening, and, most impossibly, they found a perfectly preserved sequence of DNA. The initial assumption was contamination. A lab tech must have touched the sample. It was the only logical explanation, because when they sequenced the genome, it didn't belong to a Neanderthal, it didn't belong to a Denisovan, or any extinct hominid that roamed the Earth before the Ice Ages. It belonged to a Homo sapiens, anatomically modern, genetically identical to a human being walking the streets of New York, London, or Tokyo in the 21st century. Experts scoffed. They called it a hoax, a laboratory error. But the sequencing was repeated in Geneva, then in Tokyo, then in a classified DARPA facility in Nevada. The result was always the same. The DNA was modern, but the rock it was sealed inside was 300 millennia old. This was the first crack in the glass of reality. The deeper they looked, the more the logic fell apart. This wasn't just modern DNA, it was too modern. Geneticists began to notice anomalies in the non-coding regions of the genome, the so-called junk DNA. They found unique mutations, specific adaptations to high radiation environments, and synthetic markers that do not exist in the current human population. They found genes coded for the metabolism of synthetic nutrients. They found neural pathways optimized for direct interfacing with digital networks. These were evolutionary traits that haven't appeared yet. They are projected to appear, naturally, in about 1,000 years. The implication was shattering. This DNA did not belong to someone who lived in the past. It belonged to someone who will live in the future. Scientific consensus fractured. Some physicists argued for a quantum tunneling anomaly, a random displacement of matter through time caused by a super collider accident in the future. Others whispered about an artificial genetic bookmark placed by an extraterrestrial intelligence. But the debate ended when a cryptographer, not a biologist, looked at the sequence. He noticed a pattern. Buried within the A, C, T, and G nucleotides was a repeating artificial syntax. It wasn't biological code, it was binary. It was a data packet woven into the very fabric of life, structurally resembling a three-dimensional QR code hidden inside the proteins of the cell. Someone hadn't just died in the past. Someone had used their own body as a hard drive to smuggle data into the Stone Age. It took 3 months of supercomputing power to decrypt the message. The encryption algorithm was based on a form of fractal mathematics that doesn't exist in our textbooks. It corresponds to theoretical models of quantum fluid dynamics predicted to be developed in the late 2080s. The conclusion was unavoidable. The DNA belongs to a man who has not yet been born. He is using technology that has not yet been invented, and he left a message in a rock layer that is older than the human race itself. When the file was finally unzipped, it didn't contain a manifesto or a history book. It contained an archive, a survival kit for a civilization that had lost its way. It held detailed maps of global migration patterns, not of the past, but of the next century. It showed coastlines that had not yet formed due to rising sea levels. It held chemical formulas for materials that are resistant to temporal decay, alloys that can survive 1 million years of erosion. It held a mathematical model of the universe that proves time is not a line, but a closed circuit, a shape that bites its own tail.
The archive also contained images, fragmented, corrupted visual data of a world on fire, a sky choked with ash, great cities of glass and light crumbling under a red sun. It was a snapshot of the catastrophe that forces him to leave. And at the very end of the data stream, there was a single, chilling text string, translated from a dialect of English that has drifted centuries from our own. I had to send myself back. It is the only way to close the loop. If I do not go, you do not arrive. This phrase changed the definition of what it means to be old. Researchers realized they were looking at a paradox. Who is the oldest human in history? Usually we count age by the year of birth, but this entity disrupts the scale. His biological material has been sitting in the crust of the Earth for 300,000 years. He has been part of the planet's geology longer than civilization has existed. By the metric of presence, he is the oldest human being who has ever existed. He is the ancient of ancients. But by the metric of time, he is our great-great-great-grandchild. He is a traveler who jumped from the sinking ship of the future back to the shore of the distant past, becoming the seed from which the tree of humanity would eventually grow. He is the grandfather paradox made flesh. He is the answer to the missing link. We didn't evolve from apes by accident. We were pulled forward by a design sent from the future. But the true horror lay in the hidden partition of the archive. Like a digital nesting doll, there was a file within the file, a layer of data that required a specific biometric key to open. When the researchers forced it open using the sample itself, they found a prediction. It was a profile, a dossier on a specific individual. The data predicts the birth of a male child in the year 2031. It lists his exact genetic markers. It lists his eye color, his blood type, his predispositions. It lists the hospital in a city that doesn't exist yet, but will be built in 5 years. And it lists a date, 2047. The file labels this date as the Junction, the year the loop begins to tighten, the year the causality dilemma activates. There was no explanation of what happens in 2047. There was only a cryptic, haunting message addressed to the reader, or perhaps addressed to the scientist who would eventually realize the truth. The message read, "You will see the reason when you become me." Silence fell over the laboratory. The team realized the implication. This wasn't just a message from a stranger. The syntax, the tone, the psychological profile, it implied a cyclical identity. It implies that the person destined to go back, the person whose DNA is currently turning to stone in a Colorado lab, is already here, or is about to be. The loop isn't just genetic, it is personal. One of us is destined to become him. The final nail in the coffin of linear history came from a second artifact found inches away from the first sample. It was a fossilized fingerprint. It was pressed into the sandstone, but geological analysis proved that the print was made after the rock had hardened, through a process of molecular fusion that we cannot replicate. The rock around the finger had been liquefied by a temporal displacement field, fusing the biological impression into the stone for eternity. The fingerprint was matched to the DNA. It was a perfect 100% match. This meant the impossible. This man didn't just beam his cells back. He didn't just send a signal. He was there, physically, breathing the oxygen of the Pleistocene era. A man from the future, standing alone on a planet inhabited by primitive beasts and wild nature. A man with the knowledge of the gods, stripped of his world, embedding his own code into the rock, waiting for himself to find it. He lived there. He died there. And in doing so, he began the human race. He is the snake eating his own tail. When the team attempted to file their final report to the Department of Energy, the reaction was instantaneous. Protocol Blackout was initiated. The laboratory in Colorado was scrubbed. The hard drives were wiped with military-grade magnets. The samples were seized by unidentified agents operating under the umbrella of planetary security. The researchers were forced to sign non-disclosure agreements that carried the penalty of life imprisonment in a black site. The official story is that the drilling project hit a pocket of radioactive waste. The site is now a restricted zone, fenced off and guarded by automated drones. But information, like time, always finds a way to leak. In the fragmented, redacted pages of the final report, there is a handwritten note by the lead data analyst, a man who disappeared shortly after the seizure. It reads, "He is the beginning and the end of the human timeline. He is the architect of his own existence. He is not the oldest because he lived the longest. He is the oldest because he loops." So, who is the oldest human not born yet? It is not a riddle. It is a warning. The oldest human is a man who is currently waiting to be born in 2031. He is a man who will live through the future, see the end of the line, see the sky turn black and the cities fall, and he will realize that the only way to save the human story is to restart it. He will take his own biology, his own memory, and cast himself into the abyss of the deep past. He is the first footprint in the mud of history, and he is the last footstep of the future. He is the reason we are here, and He is the destination we are heading towards. We are not marching into the future. We are marching towards Him. The time paradox is real. The loop man is waiting in the stone, and the clock is ticking towards 2047.